xTool have come out with yet another laser. This is the xTool S1 40 watt model, and they've sent that to me for free in exchange for a review. Whether or not you believe that biases my opinion or not, and whether I'm giving an honest opinion, is entirely up to you, but I've had no issues with poo-pooing products in the past that I've received. I was going to do a whole section on unboxing and assembly, except then I remembered I don't like watching unboxing videos, and the assembly in this is actually pretty hilarious because there's 4 screws you take out and then you plug in the head and then you're done. It took me longer to get the machine out of the box than it did to have it assembled and up and running. Now this is not a cheap machine, and I think that price reframes who this is for. I don't think it is for a hobbyist, it is more business aimed thing. And as such, I don't want to do a review that is all by the numbers. You know, this number is bigger than that number, therefore this one's the best one to get. I'm going to frame the entire review around making some projects to sell. So I'm going to be starting a business called The Cardboard Knight, focusing on my other passion, which is board games and tabletop gaming. So I'll be making a whole bunch of accessories around that and framing it in a business sense of how long does this project take to cut, how much post-processing is there needed, is this a product that I could make and sell in a actually worth it to me time frame, so that I'm not giving myself $1 per hour. All that being said, there are probably a few specs and numbers that I should talk about to contextualize this machine. It is still a diode laser rather than CO2, so that means it's operating on the 455 nanometer spectrum, I think. There are some advantages over CO2 lasers. You don't need to worry about any sort of water cooling. It's a lot less fragile in transport. It's cheaper. There are some disadvantages as well. That spectrum will mean that you cannot cut clear acrylic, and there are some colors of acrylic you cannot cut. This has a work area of 498 millimeters by 319, so it's not massive. Actually, I have a piece of plywood here that you can see I've already been cutting on. It's not massive, but it's also not tiny. This is actually quite a workable work size for me and the type of projects that I want to be doing. But being a totally enclosed laser, that means that you can't just place this on top of a dining table or whatever and engrave the table. You're limited to what can actually physically fit in the machine. Now there is an exception on that in the riser base, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So while being enclosed might sound like a bit of a disadvantage, the advantage is this is a class 1 rated laser, which means that you don't need any safety glasses, and that in turn means that in my workshop I can keep using all of my other woodworking tools while this is running, meaning from that business perspective it actually gets quite a big tick compared to other open framed lasers that you need to wear those type of safety glasses that aren't particularly good for woodworking tools. They're not impact rated and they really impair your vision when using said tools. Before I get started with the projects and the review proper, last spec to mention is that it has an autofocus system. So unlike xTool's previous diode lasers, it doesn't have that manual arm that you'd swing down. I thought that arm worked pretty well, but there were some times where that could be pretty fiddly. And again, from a business perspective, as in operating a laser cutting business, it could be pretty tedious trying to spend that extra minute or two focusing everything. It has a motorized Z-axis and a little probe. You press a button to focus it and it does it. And so far it has been spot on every single time. This is the first project I tried on the S1 and the first time I tried to cut through this 3mm plywood. I'd recommend testing on materials first because I discovered the hard way how easy it is to make a settings mistake. You'll notice some extra scorching here from being out of focus, which I then tried to get rid of on the drum sander and subsequently destroyed the project. Attempt to actually cut all the way through because of the adjusted settings. The result off the laser are much crisper this time. So that first attempt was a comedy of errors. Turned out horribly. It turns out when you record the height using the probe in Lightburn, you also need to actually hit the 0 button to set it to that, otherwise it just records it and doesn't do anything with the information. If you're using XCS, xTool Creative Space, the integration with the probe is fantastic and it does all of that for you. The overall software I find leaves a little bit to be desired. My workflows work better with Lightburn. So that's just something I need to get used to. All the tools are there, they work, it's just not quite as automatic. And then after not quite cutting everything out, I thought, oh, I'll compensate by just running it through the drum sander, which I haven't calibrated since the move. So it just gouged out the material and went through the veneer pretty much instantly and ruined everything. Turns out I didn't finish designing it anyway. So once I corrected the design and actually hit the 0 button, I got the second result, and that turned out fantastic. This is the negative of what was cut out in the 3mm plywood at twice the speed of what the 20-watt D1 Pro could do. No real surprise there, having twice the power. Single pass makes this actually really quite quick. It was about 7 minutes for the whole thing, maybe a little bit less than that. And what did I actually make? It's an organizer for a board game. This has all the pieces for the game, so it's really easy to get set up and playing. This game happens to be fairly newly published, so there's no existing organisers for it at the moment, so this would actually be a great time to start selling these. If I was actually to sell these, I'd be making this A4 size sheets of plywood and then shipping them flat packed to the customer inside the negative. That way it's protected during transport, and I save on labour because I don't have to assemble the things. If the customer assembles it, they save on shipping and labour costs themselves. You might be surprised, an organiser as simple as this, that took about 7 minutes to cut out and maybe half an hour to design, will go for about 30 to 40 Australian dollars. And for more complicated, larger organisers for larger games, they'll go anywhere up to about 150 Australian dollars, which if you're not in the board game world might seem a little bit nuts, but if it helps you get the game to the table, it's often really worth it. And a lot of people, myself included, love to organise all their bits and pieces, so it's just an easier experience. If you're not in board game stuff, that's not going to make any sense whatsoever. But this is a viable project to be making money with using the S1, because that was actually really quick and I could keep breaking down stock to keep feeding it into the machine while it was working. So it's all box joined together. I just need to add a few dabs of glue and this would be right to use. Project number 2 is personalised slate coasters. I'm engraving them with the class icon and character name for each of the players in my wife's Dungeons and Dragons party. The runtime worked out to 12 minutes or just over 2.5 minutes per coaster. We asked her party members what they'd pay, and after they stopped losing their minds at having their own character coasters, their response was at least $30 a pop. So there's definitely a market for this sort of thing, and it is worth it from a business perspective. So in testing for the next product, I've been having some issues with charring and smoke on the surface, both of the material that I'm cutting it out from and the product itself, both the waste side and the non-waste side of the product. And that really kind of brings us to talking about air assist. Air assist on lasers is a stream of compressed air that comes out where the beam is focused. It does a few things. It will help prevent flare-ups, fire, because it kind of puts them out straight away. It pushes the smoke away, which has a few effects. One, it helps protect the lens because the smoke isn't going straight up into the lens. It can help increase the effective power output because the laser isn't being dispersed by the smoke. So that's another great reason for using it. Because it cools the parts as they're cutting, they don't tend to char around it quite as much because it's really quite focused on whatever's being vaporized. The smoke exhaust can work better because you've got all that compressed air pushing it away from the workpiece towards the fan. Generally speaking, air assist is something you're going to want to use. There are a couple of instances where you don't want to use it either at full power or at all. Engraving doesn't tend to have as much positive effect with air assist. It will kick up a bit of dust and just will sort of blur the image. So often you'll turn it off or have it down very low. Same goes for acrylic. The cooling capacity of air assist can mean that running it at full capacity will result in a worse cut, weirdly. And obviously if you've got really thin pieces, say veneer, you may not want air assist at all because it'll blow the workpiece away before it's finished being cut, and that's a bit crap. So xTool did send over the new air assist that works with the S1. Now you can use any air assist really, this just is outputting to a 6mm pneumatic tubing, so that's what it's got on the back of the machine, you plug it straight in. This also takes power from the S1 itself, which is nice, you don't need an additional power brick. So what makes this more S1 specific, apart from the design language, is that it has an auto mode. Now this will only work in the xTool creative software, otherwise you have to manually set it in Lightburn. I don't know if that is something that Lightburn are working on, or whether that's an issue with how xTool have done it. Maybe in the future auto mode will work. Either way, this is rated as a 30 litre per minute, 30 kPa pump. It's not a lot. So I've done some testing on the differences between no air assist, using both this air assist and the D1's air assist, as I had that floating around, as well as using an air compressor. We've got 4 lines, we'll go through each of them. Obviously this one is no air assist at all, and we can see some significant smoke there. This is just on 3mm plywood at 14mm a second, 100% power. So if I was going slower, or if this was thicker, those results would be much worse, and that's already pretty not great. The next two are the D1 air assist and the S1 air assist. And these results are improved over no air assist, but they're not amazing. They are cleaner, the smoke doesn't go out quite as far, but they're still not great. And finally, we have the air compressor at 10 psi using a regulator. This is an incredibly thin line, incredibly smooth. Again, the engraving looks like hot garbage, but the actual cut is fantastic. Now, if we flip it around, what's interesting, or was interesting to me anyway, was that we see no air assist is a little bit dirty, a little bit of air assist is a lot dirty on the backside, but having about 10 to 20 psi is super clean on both sides of the cut. Given the air assist is about 300 Australian dollars, the nice design and the auto start, if you're using the right software, doesn't really make up for the insufficient air volume being put out by it. Unless you're just painting everything and you don't really need to worry about any sort of post-processing cleanup in your products, it's hard to recommend this air assist over an air compressor. There is a chance that you'll have an air compressor, and even if you don't, you can get fairly cheap ones that are going to outperform this by a large margin for the same price. It's unfortunate that I cannot recommend this because it's a nice little box and it's quiet, and the air compressor isn't quiet, but it just isn't up to the task of a 40-watt diode laser. Perhaps if you've got the 20-watt model or a 10-watt model, this would do the job, but it just doesn't put out enough air. With the air assist sorted out, I could try the third product, NatOnes. It's a great joke combining my wife's name and D&D that probably only a few of you will get. These are standees for Dungeons & Dragons. This involves a combination of engraving and cutting in plywood. I'm still fine-tuning the settings, and in the engraved sections I'm clearly running it a lot slower than I should have. The left is with the air compressor at 20 psi, the right is with xTool's air assist set to maximum. There is really no contest to the cleanliness of the cut. These are a fascinating product. They act as a colouring book using paint markers before they're used as standees in gameplay. I wanted to really push the machine to see what it was capable to cut in hardwood. Knowing what it is or isn't capable of will let me design around any limitations it may have. I started with 3mm hardwood. In these tests it's Victorian ash. I used the same settings for 3mm pine plywood and it had no problems whatsoever. Next up is 8mm hardwood. This needed to be slowed down to 4mm a second, which is still decently fast for outlines. This is still in real time. Got up to the 16mm hardwood, cut through it no problem. Well, okay. Had to go quite slow, 1mm a second, and the backside isn't amazing quality. And even though I've been talking about how this has a powered Z-axis, it just didn't occur to me that this has a powered Z-axis. So what that means is that you can change the focus kind of on the fly. So in Lightburn, there's a setting where you can do multiple passes, and each pass it lowers the focus. So I use that to cut out the 16mm thick material, and you can see the difference in the cut quality, particularly on the backside as it's getting focused as it makes each step. So I was able to go 25% faster. I went at 4 millimeters a second instead of 1 millimeter a second by lowering the focus and just in 3 passes. But that also means that you can do some really cool stuff for engraving. In the machine at the moment, I've got 3 pieces of hardwood, 3 millimeters each, stacked on top of each other. And I can have each one of those in focus when it's doing the engrave on that. And I'll demonstrate that, but it's kind of cool. I've got the focus set to the top layer here. So each subsequent layer needs to take off 3 millimeters. So 0, 3, 6 millimeters. I'm just going to engrave a very simple letter on it. First I'll do it without the focus adjustment, and then I'll do another pass on another section to show you what it looks like with the focus adjustment. This is a really great example. We can see the top row is all in focus because the top row had that offset in the Z-axis per layer. You can see these two here did not have that offset, and that's really quite a out of focus, gross line compared to how crisp it is up here. This means you'll get much more detail on any single layer so long as you set the Z-axis correctly, because this machine can handle it. So I don't think a 40-watt diode laser is supposed to cut through 16mm hardwood, but it's nice to know that it can. Sticking with the board game pieces, I want to try some acrylic component upgrades. These are something that are already sold by people, so there is definitely a market for it. I'm going to try some green and black. These colours will work fine. I'll have some orange which may work, but because this is a blue light laser in the 455 nanometer range, I think it is, it won't work for clear acrylics, and there are some other colours like white that are no good. Blue is also out because it's basically just going to reflect all of that particular wavelength. The green cut out just fine, the black cut out excellent, the orange it almost cut out. You can see there's a little bit more melting, hasn't gone all the way through in a couple of spots. White, well, you probably can't even see it. It's kind of melted a little bit into it, but it was probably only halfway through on the same power settings. And remember, this is kind of to be expected from any diode laser that operates on this color frequency, so it's not a limitation of the S1 as such, it's a limitation of all diode lasers. I did also try doing some engraving on the acrylic, and again for the black and the green, worked fantastic. It's really quite crisp. If you hit the right angle of light, you can see some incredible detail. It gets down quite small. I haven't spent a lot of time playing around with these to get the optimal settings, but they are really quite a nice result. Because someone will ask, oh no, what happens when I've made a thing but I forgot to engrave the label? This is too big for the machine. Or, oh no, I've got this heirloom board that I can't possibly cut up, so I have to put it through, but it won't fit into the machine. What do I do? Well, you purchase the riser base. First off, you might notice that the box fits in. It's about 85mm tall, and that's already sitting on the honeycomb, so you can get even larger objects than this in it. It has this little push to open hinge door on the front. There's also a matching one on the back, and that allows you to slide in and out the tray, a little bit like an oven tray, I suppose. There's multiple levels. And then that also allows you to put longer boards and have them sticking out while it's engraving or cutting or whatever. Now you'll notice that this means this is no longer sealed, and that has implications. Front and back doors have a gasket along here, magnetic plate, magnet there, and this push to open magnet, and it seals actually relatively okay. Now when I say this is pretty well sealed, I mean when you put the doors up and obviously the lid down, the fumes from this, the smoke, is mostly taken care of and vented out using the extraction fan. When it's just the main unit, no riser base, it's excellent. I've noticed no smell at all. And with this riser base, it's relatively considerably worse, but overall still pretty good. So the numbers I'm seeing on my little monitor is sort of 20 to 30 particles, whereas when it's just the regular unit, it's about 1 to 3 particles. Sometimes when I'm barbecuing and the smoke's blowing across, it'll read 100, so it's all relative. The bigger concern is when the doors are open, and that means it's super sexy fashionable glasses time. So yes, if you open these doors and then put your workpiece in like so, sticking out, It's no longer a class 1 laser and becomes a class 4 laser, which means that you should really be wearing safety glasses. These safety glasses are included with the riser base rather than the machine, which is a nature of the beast. Any of the pass-through lasers, whether that's Glowforge, which goes for many, many times more, or xTool or whatever, as soon as you have the ability to pass a larger object through it, it won't be sealed up. For me, the thing that makes the S1 just fantastic is that enclosed nature and being that class 1 device. So I can see the point of this, and I think it's a great idea to have it, but it'll probably see less usage for me because I don't want to be wearing these particular glasses in the workshop. But you can't really see this seam at all until I open it up. So look, it's probably safe to not have glasses on if everything's closed up. I can't tell because it's not mentioned anywhere. They do have one accessory that makes use of the pass-through ability in actually a way that makes a lot of sense, just not for me, and that is an automatic conveyor where you can pass 3 meters through the machine. It'll move it back and forth while it's engraving on it, which is just a crazy amount. That's more than this. This is about a 2 meter board. Now, you might not be cutting very, very, very long objects or engraving very tall objects, so the riser base may seem like a bit of a silly idea for you. However, if you are interested in the Rotary Axis, this is the same RA2 that's available for the D1 and D1 Pro. You will need to get the riser base because the height of this is just barely slightly below the maximum height, and that's before you put anything on it. And if you use the chuck module, that's going to be considerably taller. It comes with 3 cables. It has one for attaching to the D1 and other brands of lasers, one for, I think it's the M1 from xTool, and the S1. For the S1, there's a little port here that you just plug it into. And that's pretty darn convenient. The other end just terminates on the motor there. And the cables are actually available to purchase. I looked that up. They're about, I think it was $5 for them, which beats buying a whole new unit if you only need a cable. So good on them. I'm not going to go into too much about the RA2 Pro because I've already covered that in my previous review of the D1 Pro. It's a good rotary axis. It's a very good rotary axis that works on pretty much all diode lasers. It comes with rollers and it comes with a chuck, and it all works, and it works really well. All right, conclusion time, where people get to tell me I'm a shill for saying good or bad things about this machine or other machines. Fun times, internet. I'll start off with the bad. I think the price is a bad point. I don't think it is priced poorly. It just costs a lot of money. If you're in the market for a class 1 enclosed laser like this, they cost about this or more. So again, it's not badly priced. In the diode laser world, there are 1 or 2 other class 1 lasers. The Emblazer 2 sells for basically the same price, but it's a 10 watt module. And the We Create Vision is a 20 watt module, and that is comparably priced to the S1 20 watt model. If you're already in the market for these things, it's just what they cost. Just as someone who wasn't necessarily in the market for it, it's quite expensive. The Air Assist just doesn't cut it for the power of this machine. In my testing, I found that you need between 10 and 20 PSI for ultra clean cuts, and this is only putting out about 4 PSI, so they really need to double the power of it, and then it would be great. I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel a little bit looking for negatives, but there is a high-pitched noise. I think it's from the lights in the front and the back. That's a bit annoying. If you've got earmuffs on, or if you're playing music, you won't be able to hear it, but if you don't have those things, it's a bit annoying. Rather than jumping to the good, let's go to the indifferent. It has no webcam. It would be nice to have a webcam. To clarify, this is not something it needs. It'd just be nice to have, particularly for my situation. I've got my computer behind me there, and the window is over there, which is where I have the laser so that I can vent it out. It'd be really good if I didn't have to go walking back and forth to see what I'm doing. The riser base could fall into good, bad, and indifferent categories. So I'm sticking in the indifferent category. The safety features of this are really important to me, and much more important than being able to handle just a ridiculous 3 meters material. I think it's really good that there is the option, but it's just not my cup of tea because I really don't want to wear safety glasses that look this good. I get too attracted to my reflection when I'm wearing these things. All right, onto the good features. For me, it's safety. You could talk about the speed it cuts at, the power it cuts out, how loud or not it is, but for me the safety is the number one. It has a lid assist, a lid open feature, so it'll stop the machine. It's got lights so you can see what you're doing. It exhausts the fumes so you're not choking yourself or poisoning yourself. It's got an e-stop. It's got this safety key I didn't even talk about that has to be in, otherwise the machine won't work. It's very good and safe, and I don't have to wear the dumb glasses. I cannot really stress the difference in my mental state towards lasers because of these safety features. The autofocus and motorized Z-axis, which I guess work together, provide easier focus and much more accurate focus. So you press a button and it figures it all out for you. There's no real guesswork there, and that is a fantastic feature. Being a motorized Z-axis, I demonstrated how you can more easily cut through thicker material. So I guess we should actually talk about the power. In many materials, this 40 watt diode is actually going to compete toe to toe with a 40 watt CO2 laser, which is pretty exciting. If you look at say a Glowforge, for example, it starts basically double the price of this. And in wood, this is just as capable, if not more. Now, if you're cutting non-wood materials, acrylic, clear acrylic in particular, yeah, this is going to lose out because of how the physics work of it. But if you're talking other colors, particularly black, this works a real treat. So to conclude, if you're looking at enclosed lasers, so they all cost around this price or more, this gets my tick of approval. It's got the power, it's got safety, it's got speed, it's got, I guess, those things. It's green. I actually really like green. Look, green cupboards, green clamps. My tool chest over there is green. I've got green 3D printed things. I like green, so this is genuinely a selling feature for me. This gets my tick of approval. Get the honeycomb bed because it fits. It's a honeycomb bed. There's nothing really more to say about that. The clamps that it comes with, the magnetic clamps, are quite good. I wouldn't recommend their air assist. It just isn't powerful enough. You'll need air assist of some sort, and a compressor may be the easiest way to manage that. If you're doing rotary engraving, I doubt you'll find anything better than the RA2 Pro. Just be prepared to buy the riser base as well, so that adds to the cost, and be prepared to wear these amazing glasses. I don't know how many projects and videos I'll make using the laser, but certainly there'll be a few videos involving laser marquetry. I have one that is now half shot already, and I think a few projects will involve some laser engraving just for some little flourishes, but this will certainly get it some use over at the Cardboard Night. Thanks for watching.